want to start with something a little different today. We have been talking for a while about the idea of universal basic income. And whenever we talk about universal basic income, invariably, we also hear about some tech billionaire that likes the idea of universal basic income. And we wonder, anytime that we hear about someone who is in such a position of power that is for or against some policy or idea, we wonder, well, what is it that motivates them to take that position? Is it the good nature and empathy and humanitarian drive of tech billionaires that has made some of the notable ones say they support universal basic income? Or is there more to it? We recently interviewed Andrew Yang, who's running as a Democrat for president in 2020. He's running primarily on universal basic income. And we had a very good conversation with him about UBI. And he didn't seem particularly concerned that rich tech guys, mostly, as they are effectively, are in favor of universal basic income, or at least didn't seem to think that there were any self-serving reasons for that. And I've sort of floated the idea that if you are Jeff Bezos at Amazon or you are Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, just to take two specific examples, and you imagine everybody in the country getting an extra $10,000, right? Some kind of UBI of about $800 a month or $10,000 a year. People without that much extra money who get an extra 10 grand a year are very likely to spend that additional money on stuff like the products maybe sold on Amazon, or maybe stuff like the products advertised on Facebook. So that's a possible motivation for some of these tech billionaires to say, I would love to give people another $10,000 to have, which will become mostly spent money on products, because these are not people likely to be saving a lot of that money. So let's put that aside for a second, but let's remember it. Let's now talk about a related topic, activism. We spoke last week, maybe the week before, about sort of the concept of approved and acceptable activism, and it was related to the heckling of politicians and the concept of sanctioned and comfortable activism. And as I've said before, if you were only going to be activists using the tactics that those in power say are okay, you're unlikely to ever really get anything done. So the similarity here would be tech billionaires and politicians who say, we want change, we want to improve the world, etc., except only within the confines that they have established and are comfortable with. That's the one important element that underlies both how tech billionaires want to change and improve the world and how politicians want to encourage and support activism. So let me give you an example. When tech billionaires encourage and approve of universal basic income, they support changing the world via universal basic income in a very specific way that's not going to disrupt the broader status quo, and it's going to keep the infrastructure basically the same. And this is outlined in a really good article in the New York Times by Anand Giridharadas, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, called Beware Rich People Who Say They Want to Change the World. What he outlines is that giving $10,000 to everybody in the United States through universal basic income changes nothing about corporations being able to use loopholes to pay no taxes. It changes nothing about the corporate lobbying industrial complex that allows corporations to have broad control over our political system. It doesn't do anything about eliminating the carried interest loophole, which is a great tool for them to use to pay very, very little money. It's not fake change. Like, universal basic income is a real change, and the 10,000 bucks a year would be really great to a lot of people. But it is safe change that maintains the status quo and doesn't endanger the infrastructure that the corporate tech billionaire elites have built to benefit them.
Right, because in most UBI plans now, that money is coming from money that we're currently spending on social welfare programs. So things like food stamps and
Sure.
Medicaid, instead of spending in that category where there's a lot of bureaucracy, we'll just give the money directly to the people. Now, you could fund UBI by raising taxes on the rich, but that's not so politically savvy, and that's why we don't see too many of those plans out there.
Sure, but I think if you're a tech billionaire, you would probably be willing to, even if it did require paying a little higher tax, that's a pretty fair trade for maintaining the exact status quo system that has allowed you to become a billionaire to begin with, right? So now let's talk about the political side. Politicians say, let's raise the minimum wage to $15 or $20, or let's lower it to $10, or let's argue about the effect of a higher minimum wage on fast food workers. But basically what they're all saying is, let's keep the system the same and argue about the details, which are $10, $11, $12, $13, $14, or $15 minimum wage. Business charity, okay? Business charity is another one where you see activism via donations cheered, but it's actually not going to change the big picture of how the elites and billionaires and corporations control government and control politicians. So this is why I am more steadfast than ever that we need to decide the type of change that we want. We need to decide which protest methods are appropriate and when, right? Now, I'm not saying heckling Sarah Huckabee Sanders at a chicken joint changes the status quo. That's not what I'm saying. It's not about the heckling of Trump officials specifically. But the point is, anytime you let them set the rules, it means the game will never change. You will be arguing about exactly where the strike zone is, rather than actually changing the game that's being played, to use a sort of sports analogy. And right now, really, if you want change, you have to disrupt the status quo. That is where this sort of fundamental discomfort or skepticism comes from when you hear me say, I support UBI, Universal Basic Income, but we need to understand why it seems to be so appealing to so many tech billionaires. It doesn't mean that they're bad people, but we need to understand that a lot of these movements, I don't like to use the term controlled opposition, but it is an arbitrarily narrowed scope of activism. UBI, negative income tax, for example, as a discussion, neither changes the system that has allowed corporations to completely subjugate and take over control of our political system. That, I think, is the key point to keep in mind here. Today's show was made possible in part by Psyon Games and their new game for phone and tablet called Antidote, which is an award-winning strategy game that's all about using vaccines to defend the human body from bacteria and viruses. It's fast-paced. The graphics are amazing. The game has actually been commended by the World Health Organization because it has a mission to fight back against anti-vaccine misinformation. So the game is educational and fun to play. Download Antidote for free on your phone or tablet in the Google Play Store or the iOS App Store, and have a blast using vaccines and the body's immune system to fight off deadly diseases. And don't forget to search for Psyon Games on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you're watching this on YouTube, I've put the links under the video.